What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the last episode of Horror Hosts and Their Movies. This is a series I've done this October 2025 where I talk about different films that have been hosted by different horror hosts. So if you want to go back and check out some of those videos, that would be great. Today I'm going to talk about a movie called Psychomania, aka The Death Dealers.
That would actually be The Death Wheelers.
This won't be quite the last video. I do have a wrap-up video where I sort of tie everything together and kind of summarize what it's been like this month, talking about different horror hosts and the movies that they've covered. And I actually have some fun activities incorporated into that video if you want to check it out. But this is an interesting one. I first saw this a while ago on Newcastle After Dark. So definitely check out Newcastle After Dark on YouTube. They are in this, featured in this Drive-In Asylum magazine. But, you know, these guys are out there in Western Pennsylvania. It's kind of like where I went to college, kind of same area. So they kind of has like a familiar feel when you see their intro. They've got a great intro, a great set design. You know, they're wearing these vests, you know, they have Halloween specials. So I still got to check out this month's, to be honest with you. But, you know, just a great pair of hosts. They're called The Management. You've got Mr. Left and Mr. Right. And when they talk about the films, it's like two guys having a conversation. It's not like, here's a list of facts about the movies, you know. So they'll introduce the movie, and about halfway in, they usually break in and just sum up what's happened so far, and then they get back to it, and then they wrap it up at the end. It's pretty straightforward, but they just make it fun. And these guys are just, you know, you could tell, real movie fans. They've really introduced me to a lot of obscure films that I wouldn't know about otherwise. And I'm going to talk about them a little more in the wrap-up video, so make sure you check that out. Now, they showed that several years ago. Recently, on the Newlydeads Dollar Store Drive-In, they reviewed it. The episode was on YouTube some months back, so I'm guessing that it was actually recorded even many months before that. A little bit of a different movie for the Newlydeads to cover for Dollar Store Drive-In, as most of their films have been a little more recent and of the type that many of us were covering on Dollar Store Theater, back when the Dollar Store here in the United States was still carrying movies. A lot of us had something called Dollar Store Theater, like people like Charles Cochran and Hobbs Horror and myself. So those were sort of newer movies, you know. A lot of them had questionable covers, but we bought them, rented them. Yeah, right. We bought them and watched them and reviewed them anyway. Well, Psychomania has a little bit more of a solid reputation, kind of a cult film. But, I mean, it's a one of a kind. I'll tell you that much. So the film is about a motorcycle gang called the Living Dead that basically learn that if they perform a satanic ceremony and unalive themselves, they will resurrect. And the leader decides to do that first, and then some other members of the gang follow. And, you know, the community is terrorized and the police are baffled. And the audience is perhaps mystified a little bit, but hopefully entertained. That's my plot description. So they're a motorcycle gang, and they've got these crazy helmets with like a skull and crossbones and shirts that say The Living Dead. And the cast is really good. This is a film that was directed by Don Sharp, and it stars Robert Hardy as an inspector who's sort of trying to piece together what the heck is happening, why people that he thought were dead are being spotted driving around on motorcycles terrorizing people. And you've got George Saunders. I believe this is his last film. Who plays a character named Shadwell. I guess he's like the butler for Mrs. Latham, who's like a Satanist. Well, her son, Tom, is the leader of this gang, and he's one of these sort of typical rebellious guys he's kind of intelligent also, but kind of smart. So he's the one that sort of discovers this and decides to go through with it. And the ceremony, by the way, involves a frog. And then some of the other members of the gang decide to join him. So you have several scenes where people are going out in a blaze of glory. Somebody says, I've always wanted to drive through a brick wall on my motorcycle. And then there's somebody, I won't tell you all of them, but somebody else parks their motorcycle illegally, and a cop is looking around, and he calls from like the 10th story, hey, what do you want, copper? Or something like that. And he's like, is this your bike? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, well, get down here. So he's like, okay. So he jumps. And you have two female members of the gang. So there's kind of like maybe a little love triangle with the leader, where one of them goes through with it, and then the other one sort of gets cold feet and I think tries to hide it. I don't quite remember all the details. This isn't really a movie you watch for blow-by-blow plot. You just kind of take in the atmosphere and everything, which is really the best part of it, just the bizarreness of it. So eventually the police are closing in, and many of the members will unalive themselves and, come back and continue to terrorize the population until the inspector sort of closes in. Just lots of cool atmosphere. I mean, in the very beginning, they're wheeling around in a cemetery in the fog. I mean, doesn't get much better than that. One of the motorcycles comes driving right out of a tomb. I mean, out of the ground. I mean, it's got a cool atmosphere, kind of a cool vibe. Some pretty good music. If you watch Newcastle After Dark, they'll touch on things like what made this bizarre film work, and they'll talk about like Don Sharp, the director, and the music, and I forget all the details, but somebody behind the music went on to become involved with a band. If I remembered the name, you'd probably recognize it. But pretty interesting film, a strange film, and also check out the Newlydeads. Their dollar store drive-in is usually about a half an hour long. They will talk about the film, show a trailer. Sometimes, many times, they will augment the trailer with some funny sounds, some of which you have to see to believe. And then they'll come back and they'll talk about it some more. And then eventually Mrs. Newlydead will say, well, what'd you think? And they sort of give their opinion of the film. But then they also will recommend some other films that are sort of in a similar vein. So a lot of times I'll come away from one of their videos with multiple recommendations. And often they will steer me clear of the film that they're reviewing. Not in this case. This was a good one. I do like this one, but they will give you some alternate recommendations. So there you go, guys. Check out Newcastle After Dark on YouTube. Check out the Newlydeads on YouTube. They're on many other platforms, but you can go to YouTube as a jumping off point to learn about them. I've had them on the channel several times. And yeah, that's it. So come back again for one more video where I sort of wrap everything up. And let me know if you've seen Psychomania, or the Death Wheelers as it's known. And make sure you subscribe to the Newlydeads. Let me know if you guys follow Newcastle After Dark on YouTube. And thanks a lot. Later.